By the late 1960s, Jamaica was a young nation feeling its way in the world after independence. But under the surface of the sun and sea, a new energy was stirring. It felt like a low hum you could almost hear in the air, a sense of impatience and a desire for something more. Young people, especially, were looking beyond the island's shores for answers and inspiration. They were connecting with a global conversation about what it meant to be black in a world shaped by colonial history. Malcolm X. Stokely Carmichael crossing the Atlantic, carried in books, newspapers on the lips of returning travelers. These were not just abstract political theories, deeply personal messages of pride, self-respect, empowerment. These new ideas found fertile ground in Jamaica, echoed the teachings of Marcus Garvey. Black self-reliance, a return to African roots. The message of black power did not arrive in Jamaica like a formal declaration. It seeped in through 100 different channels. Smuggled books with bold covers, articles tucked away in foreign magazines, stories told by Jamaicans who had lived and worked abroad. The ideas spread fast because they spoke to people's experiences. University students under mango trees on the Mona campus, they read Frantz Fanon, they read Walter Rodney. These weren't just academic exercises. They were tools for understanding life and society. Beyond the university gates, ideas reached Rastafarian communities. African consciousness, natural living, rejection of Babylon. Rastas had been outcasts. Now beliefs aligned with a global movement. Rastas began attending public lectures and debates. A visible bridge between campus and community. A bridge between the formally educated and the spiritually conscious. One key figure, Dr. Walter Rodney. Rodney made history feel alive and relevant. He took his knowledge to the ground, speaking to urban youth in Kingston's gullies and to cane cutters in the countryside. The Jamaican government, led by the Jamaica Labour Party and Prime Minister Hugh Shearer, watched this growing movement with deep anxiety. From their perspective, the talk of black power was not about pride and dignity. It was a dangerous and foreign ideology. It threatened to tear the country apart. They saw it as a direct challenge to their authority and to the social stability they were trying to maintain. Jamaican society was deeply stratified by class and color. A small, often light-skinned elite held most economic and political power. This was a legacy of the plantation system. The Black Power movement threatened that hierarchy by telling the dark-skinned majority, you are not inferior, you deserve an equal share of wealth and power. For the elite, this was terrifying. They called it communist, tapping into Cold War fears. They branded it racially divisive, accusing it of stirring hatred between black and white Jamaicans. In reality, the movement focused on black empowerment, not anti-white sentiment. Prime Minister Shearer's administration adopted a policy of no-nonsense governance. The government's fear and intolerance came to a dramatic head on October 15, 1968. Dr. Walter Rodney, the popular university lecturer, was returning to Jamaica from a Black Writers' Conference in Montreal, Canada. When his plane landed, he was met by immigration officials and informed that he had been declared an undesirable alien by the government of Prime Minister Hugh Shearer. He was denied entry into the country he had made his home and was forced to get back on a plane. The official reason given was that Rodney was a threat to national security, accused of spreading subversive communist-style doctrines and inciting racial hatred. For the government, it was a decisive move to remove a key figure they saw as a troublemaker. The situation quickly escalated. The police used batons and tear gas to disperse the crowd, and the peaceful protest turned into a full-blown riot. For the rest of the day and into the night, downtown Kingston was a scene of chaos. Cars were overturned and set on fire. Windows of businesses were smashed. Running battles were fought between protesters and the police. The Rodney riots, as they came to be known, shook Jamaica to its core. The total damage was estimated in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, and several people were killed in the clashes. For the government, the violence was proof that they had been right all along, that the Black Power ideas were indeed dangerous and led to destruction. For the students and their supporters, however, the riots were a desperate cry for justice, the inevitable explosion of frustration that happens when people's voices are silenced. The ban on Walter Rodney was meant to extinguish a flame, but instead it lit a much larger fire, exposing the deep social and political tensions that were simmering just beneath the surface of Jamaican society. The government's heavy-handed response to Black Power in 1968 did not come out of nowhere. To understand the state's actions against Rodney, we have to look back 5 years earlier to a brutal event, the Coral Gardens Massacre of 1963. This incident began with a violent dispute at a gas station near Montego Bay, which left several people dead, including 2 policemen. Although the initial conflict involved only a handful of men, some of whom were Rastas, the state's reaction was swift, indiscriminate, and overwhelmingly brutal against the entire Rastafarian community. In the days following the incident, the government, under then Prime Minister Sir Alexander Bustamante, launched a full-scale crackdown. Bustamante was reported to have given a chilling order: bring in all Rastas, dead or alive. The police and army descended on Rasta communities in the parish of St. James and beyond. Hundreds of men and women were rounded up, beaten, and tortured. Their dreadlocks, a sacred symbol of their faith and identity, were forcibly cut off in a public act of humiliation. Many were imprisoned without trial, and an unknown number were killed. The Coral Gardens incident was a clear and terrifying message from the state. Any group that looked, acted, or thought differently was a potential enemy. Looked differently, acted differently, thought differently. The violence at Coral Gardens revealed the deep-seated fear that the Jamaican establishment had of Rastafari. To them, Rastas were not a spiritual group. They were a dangerous, lawless cult. Their rejection of colonial norms, their African-centered theology, their distinct appearance were seen as a direct affront to the respectable society Jamaica was trying to build. By persecuting them so viciously, the state was attempting to suppress a powerful symbol of African identity and resistance. The massacre was designed to terrorize the Rasta community into submission and warn others against following their path. This history provides the context for the government's reaction to Walter Rodney and the Black Power movement in 1968. In both cases, the authorities saw a threat not just to law and order, but to the very foundation of the colonial social structure. The enemy was any form of black consciousness that encouraged people to question authority and embrace an identity outside the accepted norms. The brutal crackdown on the Rastas in 1963 set a precedent, showing that the state was willing to use extreme force to crush any movement it deemed a threat. After the Rodney riots, the Jamaican government intensified its campaign to stamp out Black Power ideas. Having banned the man, they now went after the source of his and others' influence, the written word. A systematic campaign of censorship was put into motion. The government compiled a list of subversive literature that was officially banned from the island. Stokely Carmichael's Black Power, The Politics of Liberation, Eldridge Cleaver's Soul on Ice, the autobiography of Malcolm X. Customs officers at Kingston's ports and airports were given orders to seize these books on sight, preventing them from ever reaching the hands of Jamaican readers. Police and special branch officers began raiding local bookstores, the homes of known activists, searching for banned literature. Owning a Book by Malcolm X. Owning a Book by Frantz Fanon. The message was clear: forbidden to import these ideas and dangerous to possess them. The government also issued stern warnings to schools and libraries. Headmasters were cautioned against teaching materials that touched on black power or foreign ideologies. Teachers who dared discuss these topics risked discipline or firing. The media was not immune. The state pushed a dominant message of fear and condemnation. The aim: create an information vacuum, a controlled environment where only the state's version could be heard. Despite the government's best efforts to ban, censor, suppress, the ideas of black power could not be erased. Banning Walter Rodney only made him a martyr. Seizing books only made people more curious about what was inside them. The state's actions drove the movement underground, but they could not kill it. The ideas changed form, found new channels to flow through. They moved from lecture halls, public squares, into personal spaces, cultural spaces. Students who had heard Rodney speak carried his lessons in their heads. Activists met in secret, sharing tattered, smuggled copies of banned books. Pages passed from hand to hand like sacred texts. The most powerful new home for these ideas was in Jamaica's music. The spirit of black power calls for pride, resistance. Historical consciousness was absorbed into the burgeoning sound of reggae. Musicians became the new teachers and journalists. Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Burning Spear. They wove themes of African redemption, social justice, and critiques of the Babylon system into their lyrics. The beat of the drum and the bass line became a vehicle for spreading the message far wider than any lecture ever could. A song on the radio could reach every corner of the island, slipping past the censors and bringing the language of liberation directly into people's homes and hearts. By the early 1970s, the political landscape itself began to shift. The People's National Party, then in opposition, saw the growing power of this cultural awakening. Their leader, Michael Manley, began to adopt the language and symbols of black consciousness in his political campaigns. He used slogans like "Black Man Time Now" and carried a staff given to him by Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie. The very ideas that the JLP government had tried to crush were now being used as a powerful tool for political mobilization. In 1972, Manley and the PNP won the election in a landslide, partly by channeling the popular demand for social change and black dignity that the Black Power movement had unleashed. Today, the events of the late 1960s continue to resonate in Jamaica. The story of Walter Rodney's ban and the fight against censorship are remembered as pivotal moments in the nation's history. They serve as a powerful reminder that you cannot imprison an idea and that freedom of thought is essential for a healthy society. The legacy of that era lives on in Jamaica's vibrant culture, in its world-famous music, and in the enduring national conversation about identity, history, and justice. The flame that the government tried so hard to extinguish was not put out. It simply transformed, becoming a permanent part of the Jamaican spirit, proving that even when a state tries to enforce silence, the people will always find a way to sing their song.